Connected Consumer.
Hi, my name is Rosie Sarah.
And I'm Chris White. We are the hosts of the Parks Associates podcast, The Connected Consumer.
This podcast is all about Parks Associates' data-driven market insights on emerging consumer technology products and services, featuring our talented analyst team and industry leaders bringing new and innovative products to market.
This is an exciting new episode, both because we have Paul and because we're experimenting with yet another setup. I'm excited. I'm excited for someday looking back across like all the YouTube videos and just seeing the like slow march of audio device growth and like adoption. We're gonna have just a whole story that we're gonna one day share with some audio companies.
Yeah, I mean, and thankfully we have a good amount of listeners that are kind of going through this journey with us. So, but in today's episode, we have here our research director, Paul Erickson, and we're going to be chatting about a lot of hot news that are going on in the streaming world. A lot of good topics to start off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Erickson. I'm the Research Director for Entertainment and Consumer Electronics here at Parks Associates. And let's see, a bit of background. I've been in the analyst business it's making me feel dated here, for probably 17 plus years across a number of different companies. And you name it across consumer, I guess I've covered it from pay TV to services to devices to digital rights and, you name it, audio, video, even pro audio and video I've covered as well. So it's been interesting, this path to now being at Parks, which I've enjoyed very much, partially because now, whereas looking at the supply side in the past, I'm now directly looking at consumer survey data. So it's been an interesting journey, and I think for me, it's also been very helpful because now I kind of understand things from the manufacturer and supply perspective, and now also from the consumer perspective. So it's a really great perspective to have on the industry. And these days, I concentrate at Parks on a lot of topics, actually almost everything that deals with connected audio and video in the home, and whether that is a device in your living room or that's a service you subscribe to, whether that's a Netflix or it's a Spotify or what have you. I cover that entire landscape. Obviously, I can't cover it all myself, but there's particular areas that I am pretty focused on and very knowledgeable about. And luckily today we're going to talk about a couple of them, one of which is streaming video, and the other of which is looking at a few smart home related categories, which I guess Chris is about to hit me with some questions with here in a few minutes. But I'm happy to be here and happy to talk about all things consumer.
Well, I didn't want you to be the only one that sounded smart, so I have to make sure that I bring up some smart home stuff on the show so that so I'm not just blowing it when I say things like SVOD. So I'm about to say it. Ready? Okay. So there's some SVOD news I saw recently.
Yes.
Acronym I just learned, I think, today.
That's subscription video on demand.
Mm-hmm. Netflix is one of them, right? Because that's what I
yes.
was about to say. Okay,
Netflix awesome. Is the big one. Yeah.
All right. Cool. So recently they were in the news because apparently they're going to crack down on password piracy. I am a child of the Napster era, so I know that piracy is not real and information is to
all
be shared.
Imagined. Yes.
Yep, that's right. And also know that sometimes companies sue teenagers who are downloading music. So my question to you is, am I going to go to jail for letting my mom use my Netflix password?
You're all going to jail. No, I'm just kidding. It's a big topic right now for a number of different reasons. You pick them. I think the biggest one, obviously, is everybody knows somebody that's sharing some subscription password, right? And the era of the internet and IP and streaming services made this very easy, right? Because anybody with an internet connection could technically log into the same service with your credentials, and it's easy to do that and being oblivious to the fact that technically all of these companies they can see where that traffic is going, right? They know that IP address is in a completely different state, but they've not really gone after it just yet, but they will be, and they'll have to be. I'll get to whether that's going to mean they're going to prosecute people or not in a second, but a lot of these companies, they're now looking at either subscription growth slowdown or they're looking at tightening up their ROI and their finances. So they have to be a bit more careful about making sure that they're getting revenue for all the places that they're sending their content to. There's an awkward way to put it. Essentially, they want to make sure that as much as they can, that they are maximizing their subscription revenue for the amount of people that they're reaching. And so one of the ways to do that is to make sure that one, on the serious piracy side, that they're cutting back on the people that are pirating as a business, right? Commercial pirates that are reselling, the content in some way or another, illegal subscription services and so on. But, there are a lot of people that are they're sharing it with their friend, their family member, their mom. And, I think what Netflix is going to do, or what they're already in the process of doing, and what probably others, their peers, will do to follow, is that they're not going to really prosecute people in mass. Like, it's not in their interest to go after everybody that's sharing a password. It is in their interest to make sure that they're getting money out of everybody that's using their service. But, they're already trialing methods right now, as we know. And they're testing in smaller markets first before they go to big markets like the US, UK, and what have you, to find out what is the workable way in which they can make it easy for people to migrate those people who are watching without a subscription, right, or using their sharing their password to get a bit more revenue for those people, right? And whether that, who knows what it's going to be, whether that's a small additional cost per added user, or if that's, you can add a 5-user pack to your subscription for a set amount. They don't want to drive people away from using the service. They just want to make sure that there's a easy way to simply add those people to your monthly bill. And so it's in their interest to, raise their ARPU, their revenue per user every month, and keep customers in the fold. And, all of those other people that are already enjoying their service, well, maybe they're not paying full price right now, but keep them in the fold. Maybe at some point later, they do migrate to a full-blown subscription for their own household, or they like your service so much they recommend it to someone else, right? So keeping them in the fold is a beneficial thing that you can make a bit more revenue off of now, and it's only it's an area of goodwill that scales later into either recommendation or additional subscriptions. But I think we can expect to see other companies, well, one, waiting to see what Netflix does, right? Because they're the big banner for streaming video, or banner holder for streaming video. And two, they help set expectations for the consumer, right? If a consumer sees Netflix adopting an easy way to add additional members to your subscription every month, that in essence is going to set people's expectations for what they expect to be available from other services, right? And whether that's Hulu or what have you. So I think we will see Netflix once again kind of setting the first mover pace for the industry in this one. So no, you're not going to get prosecuted. Your mom is safe from prosecution. Now, you may get asked to pay a little bit extra a month for your mom, but if we're all lucky, these services make it very, very easy and very cheap.
Yeah. So what do you think made Netflix be the first one? Is it just because they're the biggest? Is it because they have, additional pressure from investors or something? Why was it them instead of?
Yes.
Okay.
They probably have. I don't know what the stats are per service. I think there was something that came out in the industry recently that I should know because this is my sector, but I forget who exactly did it.
We can
that looked at.
Let's put it in post.
Okay. That is it like a third of households are sharing, or is it a third of users are shared subscription users? A third of all users of streaming services is something really large. And I think for Netflix, they are as exposed as anybody to that, partially because of their own success and because they have a lot of really great content. They are in a unique position where even they, with as much runway debt-wise as anybody else in the industry, even they have to tighten up their finances. Okay, and additionally, they also have to look, or they're also keenly aware of the fact that they have as much sway as any other service in the industry with their users, right? Most people, like even if Netflix raised, they just had a small incremental price rise recently, but even if they raise their price $5 or $10, still there's a lot of people that will still stay with Netflix, even if it goes up by 25% or 50%. So they know they have a bit more power to actually implement something that extracts a bit more revenue out of people than maybe any other streaming service in the industry because their relationship is so strong with their subscriber base. So, yes, all of the things you mentioned, plus I think they realize that they have a very strong relationship there that they're kind of safe to operate within to basically try as best they can to leverage all of those unaccounted for users that are enjoying Netflix right now.
And there's a data point I was looking at in the deck that you're working on right now, actually, that we can talk about a little bit more later. But it got me thinking. So everyone is starting to have more and more subscription services at home,
right.
like over time, like we see this in the smart home where 10 years ago we thought, okay, this is going to spread kind of horizontally, like soon every single human will have a smart thermostat in their home.
Right.
And instead what we found is everyone who has a smart thermostat also has 10 other devices. And that seems to be kind of happening to the subscription service thing too, where there's people who have 0 and then there's people who have 5, and there's fewer people that have 1 and 2. And so I've been wondering, this is just an opinion question. Do you think there's some advantage to that being true in terms of changing price? Like Netflix raises prices and that change will get kind of lost in the mix, where I'm looking at my budget and I see a bunch of money going out to these different services and I don't necessarily remember what the price was last month. I know that they've raised it, and I'm looking at my sort of overall spend on it instead of my spend per subscription service. So I think that's going to be interesting to see as people continue to add more. And I just saw CNN Plus is happening, more and more people are getting in the game.
Right.
Whether people are going to start thinking of it as growing and shrinking their pie rather than considering really what the price is in the pieces,
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to say there. I guess we can get to the total number of subscriptions, OTT related in a second. But yeah, I want to thinking from my perspective. For example, if I have Nest Aware and I bought a Nest Hello a while back, secondhand. Because I'm a very frugal guy in a lot of aspects. But then I bought another one, right? And then I got a Nest IQ camera in the house, and next thing I know, I'm paying for a Nest Aware subscription. Or no, it was originally I had the regular, the free Nest plan. But then I'm like, okay, buy a Nest Aware subscription. And yeah, so eventually I've gotten to being exactly the person that Chris White is speaking about right now, where now I've stacked multiple subscriptions. And I wonder, though, I think looking beyond myself, I think for a lot of consumers, there's always going to be this question of what were you paying before versus what are you paying now for all these different services that are, broken up from what you may have paid previously to, let's say, a service provider for this package of services. That's a difficult one to answer. I think that this comes up, at least speaking from one particular area of focus that I'm familiar with, it comes up all the time when people are asking about people subscribing to a basket of OTT services now. Well, you guys, I'm sure have seen it all the time, quote unquote, well, aren't people paying almost as much as they were paying before for traditional pay TV, right? That was one of the allures of, going to streaming, that you could pay for just what you wanted. You didn't need to pay for all this other stuff. And my reply to that, and I don't know if it necessarily applies to your premise, Chris, but it may apply somewhat. My thought on that is that people are far more likely to pay, even if it is the same. What they're paying now is the same as what they were paying before with traditional pay TV. It's the concept of value. And not just from a company trying to market somebody on the concept of value to get them to buy their product. That's not the perspective I'm saying. But for people's actual perceived value that they're getting, you think about what they might have paid, let's say, an $120 bill to the service provider back in the day. It maybe included internet, but a lot of that was the pay TV subscription. Right. And a lot of people thought that in some way that they're wasting part of that money because it's 200 channels of 150 channels that I don't want to watch. Yeah. Right. So now when you think about someone's paying, let's say, $60 to $90 a month on streaming, and then probably $50 a month for broadband on top of that, but just for the video services part, okay, maybe they're paying, $90 to $100 again, but their concept of what they're getting for that $90 to $100 is much higher, right? The value of that is much higher because it's all stuff that they opted into, right? They chose that because they're typically supplementing let's say Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu with particular things that they want to watch, and whether that's a sports league, their service, or let's say it's UFC Fight Pass, or let's say it's Tastemade, or let's say it's something else, BritBox, because they love British comedies. So all of that is comprised of things that they want to watch. So of that $100 worth of streaming spend, 95% of that are all things that they really want. So again, it's the concept of value that they're getting is interlinked with their propensity to keep paying it and to be happy paying it. If it jumps up 30%, okay, they won't be as happy. But, that's a separate question as far as price raises. I think in the end, yes, people maybe are not paying attention to the individual adders, like all the different things that they've got stacked up. And as those, services creep up over time, holy cow, they didn't notice that their total bill now is $50 higher, 6 months compared to 6 months ago. I think, yes, maybe there will be some sticker shock realization, but I think, and this is purely subjective, that people are going to be a lot more tolerant of it, again, because of the concept that they're getting more tangible value out of that $150 spend or whatever it may be, than if we were talking, a couple years ago, and what that $150 might be comprised of with, whatever package that a service provider might have been providing you with.
Yeah.
Don't know if that answered your question directly,
I think it did. Well, I mean, it's just speculating, and this is the type of thing hopefully that we can find out in the future, right? That's why we do primary research, is to kind of raise these questions and then be able to answer it directly.
Yes, that's why we survey 10,000 U.S. broadband households every quarter.
That's right.
Got that plug in there? No, I'm just kidding.
Very good.
Okay, so great segue into our next topic on March Madness and streaming. Sports is a big benefit of live linear, and we've had, tons of panelists and keynotes talk about these issues in our future video conference series, which we had one today. So yeah, definitely check that out. We'll add that to the description notes there. So our data shows that exclusive content is impactful. So could you expand more on that and, give our listeners a little insight there? Sure.
Well, I guess sports or otherwise, any kind of exclusive content it's a boon for services, right? Because the exclusivity provided is content that people want to watch. It benefits in that it's engaging, right? It drives higher engagement. People, really, really connect with the content. They watch it. They watch it intently. But also keeps them in the fold, right? I mean, they like that exclusive content, whether it's a sports league, whether that is a particular genre. They stay with you because of that exclusivity, because they can't get it elsewhere. So just the whole business model itself is very beneficial to the streaming industry. And sports is a genre, or sports content. It used to be a sports and movies, but now it's really stood out that sports drives high viewership, it drives high engagement, and if there's anything that you're going to pay for that you really want to drive viewership and you want to drive loyalty and retention, it's sports above almost any other genre of content, and we're seeing that, and I think you were going to ask me a bit about kind of the fragmentation that we're seeing now. Was that because?
So the March Madness, because it's across like 5 channels,
right?
They, whatever big TV company bought the rights decided to scatter it across channels so that they could show their other programming at different times or whatever. They don't want to show everything on CBS because they also want to show their CBS shows. So sometimes it goes on TBS or whatever. But that creates an interesting challenge for cord cutters who might have VMPVD. I did that right.
MVPD.
MVPD. There we go. Thank you. That includes some of those channels, but not others. So if your intention is to watch all of the March Madness games, maybe I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I was looking at some articles that were basically describing like this particular like puzzle of services that you'd have to put together to watch each one. Like
it's probably like a workflow,
Fubo, Fubo for this one, and then exactly, Sling TV, and then you're switching apps around and all sorts of stuff, and some of them you're going to have to miss. So that that just got me thinking of like how also, I mean, that's also happening in the NFL. The NFL is king, and it's on 3 different channels already, and now also Amazon.
Right.
And so and there's also Game Pass is a service that you could buy from the NFL, and Sunday Ticket, which is a service that you can buy from the NFL. That's also changing ownership. It used to be owned by DirecTV, it's moving around.
Right.
So it's creating this thing where fragmentation is broadly a problem, just in terms of, Rosie and her husband trying to decide which services they want to own. Let's argue about it. I want this one. I want this one because these types of things I'm interested in too. Even within a single sport, like I'm just interested in the March Madness tournament. And It's like, unless you just have pay TV and you have those 300 channels, including the 250 you didn't normally watch. Well, now True TV suddenly matters to you because True TV is hosting some 16 seed versus 1 seed, but I don't know, you went to the 16 seed or something like that. So, I just thought that was a really interesting, very pointed example of this fragmentation, how it impacts consumers.
Yeah, I think so many things to talk about on this. Let me see if I can constrain it to a few different aspects. I think that
only the cool, interesting stuff.
Yeah, okay. Only the airtime worthy stuff here. So, I think if you look at it from a purely business perspective, for a lot of these people running the leagues or the networks, they love this, right? I mean, if you own the content, right? If you're the league, if you're the sport, or if you're the team, you want to maximize your return on investment, right? Your return on content investment, if you will, and making sure that you can monetize this from as many different ways as possible. Great, more money. Let's figure out, okay, can we sell this slice? Well, let's sell this other slice, and let's also sell this other slice. And, you look at it as exposure for the brand, aka the sport or league. And we can reach all these different audiences, right? We can expand our available audience and exposure to our brand and exposure for, let's say these individual teams or league or conference by spreading their reach across these different services, right? Because maybe they reach different markets or different platforms or what have you. And it's really great for the industry. It is really not great for the fan. And, so I think that it's in a transition period right now where you have a lot of these angles of business possibility being investigated, right? Where we're spreading out that sports content among several different outlets. And there's going to be, I think, some meeting in the middle down the road where whether a league does this in a service or someone else consolidates or what have you, or it's simply that there's going to be replication there. And I have no idea how it's going to come about, but I think there has to be some point down the road where this picture gets less complicated for fans, right? It's in the interest of the sports and the leagues to keep the fans happy. And at some point, fans are going to be frustrated at the fact that they, let's not even get into what it's going to cost, let's say, to subscribe to multiple services, just having to jump around between services to follow a season or a championship, time period. It's just incredibly frustrating for fans. So I don't have a good solution to that. Luckily, I'm not in charge of coming up with a solution for that. No P&L, rides on me for coming up with a solution to it. But, my purely hypothetical solution, which, luckily not having to figure out what the content rights are and what the cost is to make it happen, would be, let's say a league or a team or somebody having oversight or having the ability to basically dictate that they're going to have a tier of service or a service that will have everything, right? And in order to not cannibalize what's going on with all the different services that maybe have part of the season or Monday nights or what have you, that they make sure that there's a clear pricing differentiation there, right? So in Amazon or Apple TV Plus or what have you may get a certain few games, but that's merely included with their service. Now, if you want access to everything, and this is a purely hypothetical that I'm going to come up with, maybe NFL Max Plus, you pay for, at $70 a month. You get access to everything, no matter, what it is, and maybe there's a couple blackouts, but yes, you get all the access regardless of, let's say, piecemeal what some of those games may go to in terms of other services, but you can buy one master subscription to get maximum access. And that lies, that service is sold by, as far up the rights chain as you go, like maybe the league, right? Or the team or whoever it is. And, maybe that's one solution. Whether that will come about ever, I'm not really sure. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's an odd, you shouldn't have to make the fan dance around a roadmap of where to watch when, because the rights are split across so many different services and outlets. I mean, I just don't think it's workable for so many fans.
Yeah. So kind of following that thinking, like what do you think about the fact that there's been more recently, so like CNN as an example, they have their own, they're doing their own, Paramount Plus doing their own, Peacock is kind of doing their own, right? Like they're sort of like new entrants, but they're not, because they're just coming from, I guess, existing pay TV or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's the advantage of being the content owner and like the barriers you're facing in terms of just getting the technology together,
right,
versus being the person who owns the technology that's trying to get all the licensing and stuff. It seems to me like it's easier to be the content owner, right? Like, isn't that the hard part of the business?
Yeah, I mean, the content, the technology is just a connector between the viewer and the content, right? And so what happens in between is the tech portion of what's going on, and usually you need the content for anything to happen, right? For viewership to be, there has to be something to view, and for the tech to matter, there has to be something for the tech to facilitate. And in this case, it's a transmission of the content over IP. Now, I think that there's just an inevitable point of subscription overload or fatigue or whatever term you want to use, because people, they don't want to have 40 subscriptions to all these individual networks and services. And so we're seeing some of that come around where there is a demand for bundling. There is a demand for some type of consolidation or aggregation. And, you name it. Look at different areas of the market. You're seeing this. So at the device interface level, your Samsungs, your LGs, Google, all of them are iterating their interfaces towards some type of aggregation taking place right there at the UX level in terms of what you're seeing in front of your eyes. So, for example, with Google TV is maybe the best example of this, where they try to pull all services together, all that content together into a personalized interface for you, where there's not as much as having to dive into individual, start individual apps to get into each of those services anymore. It's a very content-first interface, right? So they're trying to simplify things there at the UX. In other cases, we're seeing bundles become more and more popular because people do want simplification. Now, applying this back to CNN Plus, yes, they're the content owner. They can put the content out there independently because they're the content owner, and because OTT and streaming has helped democratize access to people, right? I mean, to the ability to put it out there, whereas before you had to go through a satellite TV provider, you had to go through a cable TV provider, you had to go through some other medium to get it out there. Whereas you're not, bound to having to go through somebody else's transmission infrastructure anymore. As long as you've got access to the internet, you can put it out there to the world. So I think there's always going to be a market for these rights holders, these content owners, to sell their content directly, right? I mean, one, they own the content, and that's an additional way to monetize it. But also, there may be subscribers out there where they're willing to pay for just your content, right? They don't want to watch pieces of it, at certain parts of the day on this other network. They want the ability to watch your stuff, like either on demand or have access to the live streams from your service whenever they want to. They want actual bespoke access to it. So there's always going to be a market for that. But I think the future is one where people want simplification, and whether that means that CNN will continue to have. Well, CNN's a good example because they have their own service, but also their content is also available through other aggregators, right? Through other subscriptions and methods. I think that's probably a model we'll see replicated elsewhere, that people are going to have to understand that there are some folks that will pay for your content through your service exclusively, and it'll be direct revenue coming into your pocket. But there are a lot more people maybe where they just want things to be together in one place. And whether that means that they're going to pay a vMVPD, a virtual pay TV operator like a YouTube TV, Hulu Plus Live TV, what have you, for this package of content, whether they're going to be, paying for, whether it's going to be packaged together by one of those virtual pay TV operators, or it's going to be packaged together in a bundle. Let's say we're going to use CNN as an example. Before you buy that let's say News Extra bundle or whatever it might be branded from your pay TV provider, where it provides like CNN, C-SPAN, and maybe something else, Sky News in the UK and what have you. Maybe it's packaged that way, but there's going to be multiple monetization angles, and I think that floating your own services is one of them, but it's not the only one, and you can't reach everyone that way because people are just not going to sustain subscribing to 15 services every month. It's just not something they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean it's getting to the. I mean, this is happening in the smart home too. We talk about ecosystems all the time, and interoperability is just like it's almost boring how often we talk about it.
I actually have something to riff off of there because one of the things that I was going to talk about in a little bit was potential new devices in a smart home, at least that I look at. But before we get to that, I think about Matter. I think one question I've gotten, I don't know if you've gotten yet, which is that how do brands differentiate either in their service offerings or products? And my answer has been, with the arrival of Matter, let's say when it gets here and all the moving pieces come into place and all the participants and the vendors and services and product makers finally make it happen, and you can buy something that has the Matter brand on the package and so on, that I still think that individual parties will make, some level of functionality common, right? That's, shared with other Matter devices, but they'll still exclude, or they'll differentiate themselves by having some layer of functionality that's basically brand exclusive, right? So they'll make the basics available, right? Whether that's turning on a light or turning it off,
right?
And maybe you can set the brightness level, but maybe let's say Philips or something makes it so that the color changing feature, you can only do that with other products in the Philips ecosystem, right? Or through the Philips app. Or maybe let's say if it's Google, and they'll make, all the basic functionalities shareable to Matter when it comes to volume level, when it comes to, playing music tuned from, let's say to their smart displays, right? To Google Nest Hub. But the ability to use the translation mode, right? Is it translator mode? Interpreter mode? That's going to be exclusively Google still, right? So I think that my take on it is that Matter will be important. Matter will help interoperability, but that brands will still differentiate by keeping some things to themselves, right, within their own ecosystem. So I don't know if you agree with that take or not.
I mean, that certainly seems possible. I would say that's kind of a cynical view that I hope is not true because, I mean, essentially that's what caused the works with idea to fail. So for example, like Alexa, it can be used everywhere, right? Like it's very prolific, but people want deeper, more robust integration, and they don't want to move from app to app for certain features in the same way that they...
Right.
So you might feel happy that you're exclusive because you can use Google Home app to do something more interesting with your Nest product than somebody else than you are also while using the Matter app. I think it might cause frustration in the consumer base instead of delight. Instead of there being the I'm on VIP because I'm using my more exclusive features. Will they be instead frustrated that there's like an extra layer of complexity to them using it?
Right, or there's some added layer of value that they can't access, right? Because they have a mixed brand household or something.
Yeah, and everyone has chosen control, either a device or an app. There's a lot, we have a good report called Unified App Experience that you should check out. That really examines this. So I think it'll be interesting. I would rather it be a fight, have them come in and fight based on features, based on sort of mix of, so everyone's kind of aggregating OEM content into the device, right? I would rather see them kind of fight about that the way that like the PC wars occurred, where everyone was basically running a single operating system, but Dell versus Gateway versus whoever, just like we're dealing with now. It's about who's choosing what mix of hardware to kind of put together. Like, you're not competing on like something that's so different. You're just competing on something that's very small, and just because that would benefit the consumer,
right?
And that's because I'm kind of rooting for mass market, and so I think easier and more delightful is how we get to mass market. But we'll see. I mean, we were just talking about the is the user experience more important, or is it better to have this fragmented system that benefits the kind of incumbents?
Right.
And we'll see. It depends on how nice they decide to play with each other.
Right.
There's a lot of people who, by the way, just think Matter's just going to fail anyway. Like the more cynical perspective is Apple will just change their mind and pull out.
Right.
And then this thing is never going to happen. And that's the reason why it keeps getting pushed back. And it's not supply chain, it's internal politics that,
right.
So there's a lot of that discussion too. So we'll see. I mean, it's supposed to happen at the end of this year that we start seeing some devices. That's kind of the latest optimism that I've heard, is that we're going to start seeing the little arrow, 3 arrows symbol.
Right.
At Target, I guess, in 6 or 9 months, but we'll see.
Well, I'm not quite so cynical to think that it's not going to happen, but I guess I'm curious to see what
you're going with. The moderately cynical.
Moderately cynical. Because I think that a lot of companies, especially your bigger ecosystem companies, are going to feel that they have the power to hold something back, right? I mean, that they're willing to share, but they're not going to completely allow access to everything unless there's a revenue benefit back to them. Right, so unless they find a way to cross-sell.
They kind of did the math on that a little bit and decided, let's jump to mass market and then start fighting dirty again. Let's play nice for now. Like, we've done just fine. We've convinced everyone who's 25 to 45 and makes $100,000 a year to buy our stuff. Like, we already
not
got
everyone else. Yeah.
But what about everyone else? Let's get them involved. And once they get a taste, then we can make it hard for them.
That's right. Give them a taste. Dude, the first taste is cheap and easy. And then we got you. Well, is that even more cynical? Maybe. Yeah. So I'll be interested in seeing like where things ultimately fall out, and exactly where, if it's the cynical view or it's the less cynical view. And I think the most cynical view of like what does it take to go mass market is going to be, well, it has to be cheap, right? I mean, and that's the last thing the companies want to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, cheap, but what do you mean by cheap? Well, it's cheap, like you make it easy, but there has to be a way, obviously, to balance priceworthiness with functionality and compatibility and so on. And I think that is usually the medium, like some merging of all of those factors usually is what defines mass market. So we'll see. We'll see how close they get to that nexus of qualities over time. And I think one thing that is probably not going to be mass market, because I expect it to be expensive, is something I guess you guys are going to ask me about, which would be new products in this arena, like smart speakers and smart displays, partially because I cover specifically smart speakers and smart displays for Parks Associates, including in a smart product market assessment report we have coming up. I think that's plug number 6, plug number 8 so far that we have coming up this year that I'll be working on shortly. But yeah, I think you guys had mentioned before, we started recording here that maybe new products from some of the major players would be of interest to talk about. And Chris, I'm sure that you found all of the product innovation from Amazon when it came to smart displays very interesting over the last year, including the 15. Is it a 15-inch Echo Show, the wall mountable one? Right, the Echo Show 15. Is that what they're calling it?
Is it 15? Yeah. They're getting bigger and bigger. They're moving into. Is it gonna finally get me as like a dad who wants to look at pictures of his kids all the time? Am I gonna finally be that guy?
It's I can't help but compare it to refrigerators with displays in them, right? So where does that ultimately lie? I think you can't think about it from maybe some of the traditional use cases and form factors and things that we would see it as from a legacy device perspective. maybe it is something where, they are trying to see what new use cases can come to light, and some of it might be, throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks, but also, these are simply still in the grand scheme of things, newer product categories, right? I mean, it's not like the TV, which has been around for decades and decades.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think like how these devices are used, whether they're smart speakers, smart displays, I mean, that story is still being written where this is going to end up. And yeah, maybe, ultimately that wall hung smart display, will it be a picture frame? Will it be your smart home interface? Will it be, what you watch cooking videos on from, the kitchen versus like having a smart display on your kitchen countertop and it's a way to clear countertop space? I don't know. Maybe it'll be all of those things.
Yeah.
I think that segueing to new potential devices, the rumors that have come about lately about the whatever next iteration of the Google Nest Hub will be, I think that just to fill people in, the rumors are that it might be a removable tablet type of form factor, probably bigger screen than we're used to. That's interesting. Because I think the other interesting aspect of that rumor that came at the same time is that it's not going to necessarily run either Cast OS or the Fuchsia OS that the Google Nest display devices have run in the past, but that it'll run some iteration of full Android, either Android L or regular Android. And, again, these are all hypothetical and rumors, but The thing that I'll say from my end is that I can completely see it as being true. One, because Google's done a lot more work as of late on tablet related factors when it comes to Android, and two, that essentially the next place to go with the smart display concept is to see where else, much like we're talking about the hangable smart displays taking the place of digital picture frames and all these other things that we've seen in the past. That
frame TVs too, as like another kind of blurring the lines
right
between categories.
Samsung's Frame is a good example too. If we think about if we think about high-end home installations in the past and home automation and people that have that call in AVI SPL and all these other integrators to set up this amazing household or this mansion or this connected home. Ages ago, we thought of that as like somebody having a control console where they're controlling their security and their blinds and then also their lighting and their audio from this one big master control. And certainly that is a bit of an older concept. But now, even still, if you think about the smart display, whether that's an Echo Show or that's a Google Home Hub or Nest Hub, essentially they're already heading in a direction where they want that to be a place where you can control your entertainment, you can control your smart home. And of course, you can also do a bit of content consumption directly. And these rumored directions for the next Google Nest Hub, it being some type of removable tablet concept, fits right in with that, right? So I can see it happening. It may be complete rumor, but I would think that that's a viable form factor direction to go just because it's something that you can take around with you in the household. You can control your smart home from it. You can control your entertainment consumption from it, right? Like turn on your TV, play something to the TV. But also it's not, it's not limited to being just that one. It's not just a portable display for your smart display concept. It's also a standalone tablet, right? It can do everything a normal tablet can do. And I think that this is a good cross-sell to the consumer where they feel that this is it's a very familiar concept. It's a tablet, quote unquote, but it also does all this other stuff. And I can just park it on this stand and it recharges itself. And when I leave it on the stand, it's just like, a smart speaker, a smart display. I can talk to it or I can do these other things. So I like the concept.
It's like, what were you going to buy that tablet for?
Yeah.
Is it these 4 or 5 things? We do it better than your regular tablet your tablet that.
We do it all in this one tablet.
Yeah.
And, if you plug it into the base, it's got this great sound system that you can't get with just a regular tablet. So there's a few different ways to roll up multiple products into one selling proposition. Now, again, me waxing philosophical about how cool this is has absolutely nothing to do with, like, if they price it at $350, is it going to sell? I don't know. Right. But we'll just have to see. Anyway, so I went off for 5 minutes on how I like this new form factor. What are your thoughts on on this rumor, Chris, if it's going to be viable?
I mean, I think it's interesting because it's I think it'll take from the tablet market instead of building off the smart home market and being focused as like a smart home control and trying to appeal to the people who, like, you're growing your little Nest ecosystem at home. Like, instead of appealing to you, is it going to appeal to somebody who is looking for a tablet just to use for the family, like a second or third or fourth device? Like, this is like always I feel like this is something that you guys talk about too, like the battle for the fourth screen, the battle for the third screen.
Right.
Like, is it going to be in your car? Is it going to be this? And it's like, okay, me and my wife already have work laptops and home laptops, and she has an iPad. Well, my 3-year-old's going to want something someday. So, like, there's all these kids tablets that are creepy. That, like, I don't know. Well, some of them are like, we'll show them commercials and stuff. And that seems really gnarly to me. But anyway, so, like, but my point is like, when you're thinking about adding your fourth or fifth device, maybe you do this one that does these other things, and maybe you're not a smart home aficionado. Maybe it does appeal to, like, a mass market who just wants a tablet to do a couple other things.
Right.
And maybe it builds off of the smart speaker success, because now instead of just asking your digital assistant the weather, you can, see a 5-day forecast also. So maybe that's going to be, I could see it working. I mean, smart displays, like, we currently group them a lot of times with smart speakers.
Yeah.
Because people kind of use them for the same things. But as you, like, iterate on one or the other, it's like create some advantages and eventually we'll have to pull them apart and, look at, why are people choosing one or the other? And so I think more tablet functionality maybe is the way. Like, maybe that's the direction it moves.
Well, I think we've had a lot of really great conversations today on live streaming, and Paul, you have had a lot of recent reports release, one of them being live streaming, the next hot video market. That one was released, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, and then there's a couple of ones coming soon. So could you share more with our audience on what you have coming up?
Sure. I guess I already mentioned the smart speaker and smart display SPMA, Smart Product Market Assessment, that I have coming up this year. But probably the next most recent report that I have coming up and relevant to what we just spoke about is a quantified consumer deck, again, built off of our survey data, called OTT, Perception, Use, and Business Models. And this deck essentially takes a deeper look at all the different ways that people are subscribing to OTT services, but also looking at the breakdown of subscribership by factors like age, gender, income, reasons why people are subscribing, reasons why they're canceling, what services they're most likely to recommend, attitudinal factors, and more. So a lot of aspects beyond the typical stats that you see around on just OTT penetration and subscribership. And, I think we've talked a lot. I think Parks Associates has talked a lot about service stacking and, that people are subscribing. I guess nearly half of all U.S. broadband households are subscribing to 4 or more OTT services. And 80% of the U.S. Broadband household base, I should say, subscribes to at least one OTT service. And I think when we look beyond that, one interesting factor that we see that we're going to actually explore further in this upcoming report, OTT Perception, Use, and Business Models, is going to be that 56% of people now are using both the big three services. So these days, that's Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus or Disney Bundle. They're using both the big three and a mix of other services, which is more than double the share that it was in 2019. So this means that people today, they really are leveraging the diverse access to a broad selection of content that's now available because of the democratization of access that OTT gives. And so they're supplementing that standard Amazon, Hulu, Disney or Netflix subscription with a variety of subscriptions now to other services that fit their particular tastes. And whether that's a genre, like horror, foreign content, UFC, or DIY, cooking, what have you, they really are finding ways to have that, that standard service that they're subscribing to every month, no matter what, when Netflix, Hulu, what have you, with all the things that they really like to explore. Right? So we see people experimenting outside of those big three. And so that's one aspect that we think is really interesting about subscriptions to OTT services today and how people are using them. And we expect to publish this report that looks into all these different second layer and third layer insights into OTT subscription and consumption around mid Q2. So we're looking forward to that coming out pretty soon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our episode today. Could you share with our audience where, they can find you on social media and reach out to you about all of your new content coming soon?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm connected to all the Parks folks on LinkedIn, but certainly if you look under Paul Erickson and Parks Associates, you'll find me on LinkedIn. And on Twitter, I'm at Paul Erickson AV.
Amazing. Make sure to reach out to him if you have any particular questions about today's episode or anything like that. Connected consumers, thank you for tuning in today. Please remember to subscribe and like all of our content across all of the platforms that we host, including the video element to it. If you're seeing us now on the camera, here we are. And then if you could please tweet at us. Chris's Twitter is at CWhiteInsights, yes, and mine is Rosie Olpino. So please feel free to tweet at us via Twitter, and then our Parks Associates Twitter handle is at Parks Associates, so you can reach out to us there and let us know what you'd like to hear next.
Connected Consumer Podcast.